Hey, y'all. Welcome to Coffee with Steven. I'm Steven, and I got coffee. Mhm. I've been drinking this stuff like crazy, y'all. It was a rough start to the day, so it took a lot for me to get going. But today we are going to do a book review. We are going to do a review of Feed by M.T. Anderson. So this book was actually recommended to me by a friend on X. His name is Tyler Kirk. Tyler is also an author, and Tyler has two books. One of them I've ordered, and one of them is on the way. So the one that I have right now is called Children of Strife, The Arsonist. And the other one is called The Vitamin Kid. So check out Tyler, order his books, give him some support, show him some love. That would be really, really cool. But I want to go ahead and tell you a couple things up front. One, I'm going to go ahead and tell you I enjoyed the book. I'm going to start giving my ratings in cups of coffee. So a 1 to a 5. 5 cups of coffee are really, really good. 1 cup of coffee was terrible. So I'm going to give this book a 3.5. It was right at a 4, but there was one thing that was in there that it made me go to a 3.5, and I'll tell you about that in 1 second. So yeah, y'all, this is a pretty darn good book, and would I recommend it? Yes, I would. Would I read it again? Yes, I would. So we got that covered, so let's talk a little bit about the book. So my next statement is going to tell you the time frame that this story takes place, and also the thing that I don't like that was in the book. So I'm going to read it to you. So the book takes place in America in a futuristic, deteriorating Earth. The only reference to when or the time frame was a statement made later in the book. It goes like this. Violet's great-great-great-grandfather fled Germany just before the Second World War. He was a homosexual. ... So there gives us a time frame. So right before the Second World War, it was her great-great-great-grandfather. So there's 4 generations right there. You can kind of do the math. I think, y'all, that puts it like 2 generations above where we are right now. So that was the time frame. And then the part that I don't like is the reference of him as a homosexual back in the 1940s. It had no purpose because the next couple of sentences actually say that he comes to the U.S., he marries a candy striper, and they have kids. And that's the only time he's referenced in the whole book. All right, so the book is divided into 4 parts. The first part is called Moon. So let's talk about it for a little bit. So the story focuses on 2 characters primarily. The narrator, his name is Titus. He's the main character. And Titus has 2 male friends. They are Link and Marty. Link has an unusual background. His name references Lincoln, as in Abraham Lincoln. So supposedly, according to the book, he was cloned from some of the blood on Abraham Lincoln's wife's cloak from the opera where Abraham Lincoln was killed. So it would have been Abraham Lincoln's blood. Link is really tall in the book, so there's the other reference to Abraham Lincoln. Thought that was kind of funny, but I thought I'd share that with you. There are 3 boys. That is Link, Marty, and of course Titus, the narrator. And there are 3 girls, Callista, Loga, and Quindy. So they all arrive on the moon together, and they check into a really crappy hotel. They went to the moon for spring break. So I think spring break for them and going to the moon, and the moon being like what I'm going to call Panama City Beach, because they reference the moon being really trashy, trash floating around everywhere. They check into a really crappy hotel. And there's a couple other references that make you think, oh, this isn't a great place. But the moon is kind of geared toward teenagers and, college kids to go and enjoy themselves. Everyone in the group has lesions. So lesions are pretty common. Lesions are, like cuts in the skin. They have pus coming out of them. And sometimes lesions are actually used as fashion statements in the book. So there's something for you to keep in mind. But the lesions seem to be caused by issues with the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is contaminated with radiation, and the book leads you to believe that's where the lesions come from. So when I first started reading this book, I struggled. I'll tell you, I read the first 30-ish pages of it, and I thought I was going to DNF the book. Did not finish. I didn't understand the conversations. I didn't understand what all was going on in there. And I think the big part of it was, if you think about the way your kids talk today and how your great-great-grandparents would interact with them, would they understand the phrases and things that your kids say today? I know that my great grandparents would not understand my teenage daughters. They just talk a whole lot different than I'm sure they talked back, a couple generations ago. The other thing is during the conversations of the characters, you also have interjections from what's called the feed. The feed is the AI in the book, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But both of those put together, I had a hard time figuring out what was going on. So I stopped and I put the book down and I went back to it the next morning, and maybe my brain just started understanding the way the flow of the book was going, because once I started reading it again, I enjoyed the heck out of the book, y'all, and I really, really liked it, and it was hard for me to put the book down. There's a bunch of unique words they use and unique phrases they use throughout conversations. So one of the ones that I really like was, I say dude all the time. Well, in this book, they substitute the word dude for unit. So instead of saying dude, unit, what's up, unit? How you doing, unit? They use the word unit. And then another thing that I thought was really interesting was if you talk about conversations and, somebody's saying something and you go blah, 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 blah. Well, in the book, they don't do blah, 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 blah. They will start out a conversation, something like, Wendy said da, 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 da. And they use da, 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 da a lot in the book to kind of say this is where conversation happened, and it just kind of went in one ear and right out the other ear. So the feed is a small computer that is embedded in the brain when children are really, really young. And this is the AI that I referenced earlier. It's called The Feed. And that's the name of the book too, is Feed. So if you ever saw the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, this is kind of what the feed is. So the feed is this intelligence that's embedded in the brain, and feeds, there are three major corporations in the story. They're only referenced once, but there's three companies that have their own feed where they sell to consumers. You have to buy the device to be embedded in your brain. It's not given to you, but it has to be done at an early age so that it can actually attach and things start bonding and working well together, because there's dangers if you do it too late, and we'll talk about that soon. But the feed advertises to you all the time, so you could be walking down the street and go by a store, and it would tell you, hey, come in here and buy this. These are on sale. You're looking really happy, and you could use some happy juice and things like that. It also stores your memories. So if I had an experience a couple years ago and I wanted to share that experience with you, I could send you my memory in the feed, and you could actually feel and smell and sense all the sensations that I had when I experienced that memory. So that's kind of a cool aspect of it. The other thing the feed has is information. So it's like our internet is currently, and then there's the ability to chat. So in the feed, you can chat to one person and nobody else can hear it. You can chat to a bunch of people and everybody be in a group, and it's all done by your brain. You just, you think it and it happens. Then you can broadcast. So if you're experiencing something, you can broadcast your experience, your feelings and everything, so people around you can feel what you're feeling. And sometimes they mention in the book about going through broadcasts and feeling somebody else's broadcast. So it's kind of really interesting, all the things that can happen with the feed. The other thing I will say about the feed is it's constantly building a profile of you. It knows what you want. It kind of predicts what you want, and it also probably knows you better than you know you. So let's get back to the kids, okay? Teenagers. Let's get back to the teenagers. So they arrived at the moon. They check into their hotel, and they're kind of sitting around. They get bored, and they decide that they're going to go to a bar. So they go to a place called the Ricochet Lounge. So the Ricochet Lounge has varying levels of gravity. And the kind of idea of the Ricochet Lounge is you kind of float around and you bounce into people and bounce into the walls, and you push yourself and you go faster and you hit other people. Kind of think of bumper cars without the bumper cars. That's kind of what the whole purpose of the Ricochet Lounge is. Well, while they're at the Ricochet Lounge, Titus looks over and he sees this girl, and she is the most beautiful girl he has ever seen. He just kind of falls for her really, really fast. Well, she's standing there watching all of them, bouncing all over the place and everything and taking it in. And he notices her. She turns around and she walks away, and she goes to the bar to get something to eat. Well, he decides he's going to go up there to the bar and check her out. And he's kind of shy, and he's kind of scared to talk to her because she's so pretty and everything. So he's just hanging around. Then all of a sudden his friends come up, and his friends start talking to him, and they start interacting. And finally, they get this girl involved in their conversation. Well, we come to find out that this girl's name is Violet. So from this point forward, Violet becomes one of the main characters of the book. So the group of teens decide they've had enough of the Ricochet Lounge. They go back to their hotel. They sit around. They try to break into a little mini fridge to get some beer, things like that. They get bored, and they end up going to another bar called the Loeb Reamer. So Loeb, like your frontal lobe, Loeb Reamer. So the Loeb Reamer is more of a dance club than where they were before. So everybody's out on the dance floor dancing and having a good time. And they start looking around and they see this old guy in there. And I picture the old guy about my age, but I think they said he had long hair. He really looks out of place with all the teenagers and the college kids in there. Well, they hear him saying something, and he's actually screaming. He's screaming, "We enter a new calamity. We enter a new calamity." Well, he starts walking around screaming, "We enter a new calamity," and he has something metal in his hand, like a metal pole or metal handle, and he starts touching different teenagers on the neck. And as he touches them on the neck, they start saying, "We enter a new calamity." And he goes around and he's getting more and more people, "We enter a new calamity." And they all start lining up and saying the same thing together. And then he comes up to Violet and Titus, and he gets both Violet and Titus. He ends up getting a couple dozen people in the bar, but one of the teens that were in this group, he didn't get all of them. I think it was Loga he didn't get. So Loga was the one girl out of the group that he didn't get. Well, the police have been notified, and the police come, and they apprehend this guy and take him down. And we come to find out later in the book that not only did they take him down, but they actually killed the guy. So they brutalized the heck out of that sucker. And so all the teens that were done something to, they take them all to the hospital. We get into section 2 or part 2 of the book. Part 2 of the book is called Eden. And if I didn't tell you there were spoilers in this review, there are spoilers in the review. So we haven't got to the part where where I need to tell you about spoilers, but there will be spoilers. So if that makes you apprehensive, stop listening right now. Go ahead and listen some more. Part 2 of the book starts with Titus waking up in the hospital. He's kind of groggy, but he doesn't know where he's at, and he's not hearing anything with the feed. He can't broadcast anything. He can't chat to anybody. His feed has been turned off, and he doesn't know what to do. He's just really, really confused. Well, several of the others start waking up, and they're confused as well. They don't understand what's going on. They're trying to chat with each other, and they can't do it. So they're sitting around trying to figure things out, and they finally are informed by the doctor that their feed has been disconnected while the doctors and the police do some research to try to figure out what was going on. So come to find out, they were all hacked. So this guy, he was a hacker. He hacked their feed, made them do some really crazy stuff, and the guy is no more. The doctors and the police finally decide to turn the feeds back on, with the exception of Violet. They took Violet out separately. They talked to Violet for a little bit, and then the next thing you know, Violet comes back in and she gets Titus, and she calls Titus and she wants Titus to go walking with her. So Titus and Violet go walking. They talk a little bit. They find out a little bit about each other's family. Titus' dad is into banking. He comes to check on Titus, and Titus is kind of wondering where her family is. She tells him that her dad is a teacher. He wants to know, what does he teach? He teaches the dead languages. And this is something I thought that was really funny. What are the dead languages? She said, he teaches BASIC and Fortran. Y'all, I took BASIC and Fortran programming languages when I was in middle school, so I thought that was really funny. It's considered, well, it is a dead language now, but I thought it was really funny the way they talked about it being a dead language. So they talk a little while longer, and then part 2 of the book ends with Titus and Violet sharing a kiss. We get into part 3 of the book. Part 3 is the longest part of the book. It is called Utopia. So in this part of the book, it really builds up the relationship between Titus and Violet. They do a lot of stuff together. They get to know each other a lot. They meet each other's family. Violet has a couple of dinners over at Titus's house. Titus goes and meets her dad, has dinner with them. Her dad is really, really smart and talks with really, really big words intentionally to try to make things confusing. He's kind of weird. We find out that Violet's mom left when she was really, really young, so her mom's not in the picture anymore. There are several words mentioned in this part of the book that have the trademark symbol on them, so the little TM. There are words like school, clouds, and facts. So those words are trademarked by the big corporations that own the feeds. I thought that was really interesting. Then there are references to brands that actually survived that far in the future. So Coca-Cola, Pepsi, FedEx, Nike, they were all mentioned. So those are the big brands that made it to the future. At one point, they start talking about up cars, which are cars that fly. Titus's dad decides he's going to buy Titus an up car for the ordeal that he went through on the moon. And they go looking for cars. Several brands of cars are mentioned in there, but the only brand that seemed to make it was Dodge. Dodge was the car that he ended up buying. The other ones are like made-up brands that you never heard of before. As you go around the world, you see that most places, individual homes have domes over their homes. They can turn the sun off and on whenever they want to. It seems like they can control their own climate individually. Where Violet lives, you find out that she's in an older area, and her subdivision actually has one dome over it. So the HOA actually controls when the sun rises and sets in her subdivision instead of individual homes like where Titus lives at. You also hear where the neighborhoods are on top of each other. So as you go up tubes in your car, you go up and you pass different neighborhoods as you keep going up before you get over everything and you can start to fly. So early in the third part, we find out that there is something wrong with Violet. So Violet and Titus are talking, and she tells Titus that her feed is broke. Something happened to it when she got hacked. She doesn't know what happened. She can't explain it, but something happened to her when she got hacked. We later find out that Violet didn't get her feed young enough. She was a little bit older when she got her feed. Her dad couldn't afford it initially, so it was a while before she got her feed. I think that the reason she's having problems is because of the age she was when she got the feed. She starts having problems. Sometimes she can't move her hand, or sometimes she can't move her feet. They just stop. They're non-responsive. And this happens like every other day. And as the story goes on, it gets progressively worse. So throughout the book, we get pieces of information about the world. The feed just spits out occasionally pieces of information. So it might be advertising to one of the kids, and all of a sudden it will say something about America is being criticized by the rest of the world for trying to make the moon the 51st state. Or it will say something about people rioting somewhere. It says something about radiation. So we get these pieces of information as the book goes on. So Violet wants to get out of this city. She wants to go out into the country and see the country. So she talks Titus into taking her to the country. Titus and Violet go on a field trip to the country, and they run across something called a filet mignon farm. Yep, I'm talking about steak, y'all. And it is a farm, not cows. They're actually synthetically growing filet mignon like trees, just as far as the eye can see. Just a big old place with nothing but synthetic meat growing. And this is so big that they have like tubes of blood that's feeding to the filet mignon so it can continue to grow. And this place is so big and such a touristy area that they actually have a maze in one part of it where you can go through the meat and kind of, like you're going through a maze and explore it a little bit. So that was kind of an interesting story that they told in the book. Getting close to the end of part 3 in the book, Titus and Violet go to a party. They're at the party. They're having a good time. As we go through this part of the book, it's a feel-good book. The stories are a feel-good story. You're really enjoying it. You love that connection that Titus and Violet are making. They've got love is in the air. It's just really, really good. Well, getting close to the end of this part of the book, they go to a party, and there's a bunch of teenagers at the party. They're all hanging out, doing their thing. Well, Titus and Violet go upstairs, and as they go by some of the bedrooms in the house, there's some people making out on some of the beds, and then there's some people that are mal. Mal seems to be something like malfunction in the feed. And you come to find out in the book that a mal is a site that you can go to in the feed that will kind of disorient you. So it's like taking drugs. It's like taking virtual drugs. So some of the mal is mild sensations, and some of it really, really messes you up. So that's what mal is. But they notice that some people are malling out, and they continue to go up, and I think they go up on a roof or something like that, and they're having a long conversation, talking, enjoying each other's company, and they kiss and hold hands. They decide to come back downstairs and leave, but as they're heading downstairs, a group of kids are playing spin the bottle. So they finally twist the arm of Violet and Titus and get them to play spin the bottle with them. They sit there for a while, and the bottle finally ends up on Violet. Well, this guy named Marty, one of the 6 original kids, he's the one that spun the bottle, and he's headed over, I'm going to kiss you and all this kind of stuff. Well, Violet freaks out, and I mean, she really, really freaks out. She starts screaming and hollering. She tells everybody to stop it, I'm not playing this, and and she starts panicking and everything, and she starts saying stuff to people that she probably shouldn't have said and that people really, really didn't like. It was just, in her normal mind, I promise you, she probably wouldn't have said it at all. But right away, Titus starts noticing that it's probably her feed that is messing up on her. But she starts seizing, like having a seizure and everything. And the next thing you know, she just drops to the ground and everything. And Titus is there holding her, trying to, make sure she's okay, and yelling at everybody to call an ambulance, call an ambulance. And that's the end of part 3. Part 4 is called Slumberland. Y'all, I am not going to sugarcoat this for you. Part 4 is really a downer. I mean, it's a good read, but it is a downer. So we go from highs of, happy, happy, happy to now we're going to get really, really sad. So part 4 starts out with Violet in the hospital, trying to figure out what happened to her at the party. Titus is sitting in the waiting room, waiting to try to find out what's going on with her. Violet's dad comes in, walks right by Titus, didn't seize him. He tries to find out what's going on. The doctor finally comes and gets the dad, tells the dad what's going on. Titus walks over to the dad and says, hey, and they remember each other and everything, and they start talking about Violet. Violet's dad gives Titus a link to her health status. So her health status is a number that says how good she is. And if everything was well, then she would be like 98%. Well, she's 80-something% right now in the story. And throughout the balance of the story, her numbers continue to go down. So the lower her numbers get, the worse off she is. And as we're reading this part of the book, the chapters in this part of the book have titles on them, and most of the chapters in it are that number. So she goes down to 78%, 54%, 30%, something like that. It just continues to drop. Finally, the doctor says to her dad that he can go in there and talk to her for a little bit. He goes in there and talks to her. Dad comes out and says, hey, she wants to talk to you now. So Titus goes in there and they're talking to each other. And Titus is kind of standoffish a little bit. He doesn't really know what to say to her because she insulted his friends and embarrassed him at the party and everything. And he's really upset. And you can also tell that he knows that she's dying, and he really doesn't know how to handle this. So there's a little tension there. And finally, Titus says, hey, I got to go. So he leaves. So over the next several weeks, Violet's trying to communicate with Titus. She's chatting him and everything, and he's really standoffish, and he'll take one every once in a while, but most of the time he ignores her. She starts sending him memories to store for her, and he deletes the memories. She sends him a list of things that she wants to do before he dies. He kind of goes through the list a little bit here and a little bit there, but eventually he deletes that list as well. He's really almost over her. He just doesn't know how to handle it. And this kind of really frustrated me in the book for a little bit because, one, I try to put myself in the place of a teenage boy going through something like this. I wouldn't want that drama either. But at the same time, he's a jerk. I'm just saying, he just comes across as a jerk the way he's handling this. So after a few weeks, Violet shows up at Titus's home. The mom lets Violet in. She goes up to Titus's room and she's like, hey, did you get my message? I want to go to the mountains. He's like, no, I didn't get it. You really didn't get it? I can't believe you didn't get it. Did you get my memories? Did you get my list of things I want to do? And he lies and he says, no, I didn't get them. Well, I want to go to the mountains. I want to see the mountains before I die. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, but I've got other things to do. If I'd known about it ahead of time, we could have planned it, but I've already made other plans. And she's like really mad. What is wrong with you? What do you mean you would have made other plans? You're just hanging out in your house. And finally, she twists his arm, and they decide to go to the mountains. So they go get in Titus's up car, and they start going to the mountains. They're quiet on the way up there. Not a whole lot is said. You can just feel the tension between the two of them, and Titus really is standoffish. So one of the things that Violet had on her list of things to do was to go places with Titus and check into places as Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Just a made-up name, but she thought it would be really, really funny to do it. So she reserved a cabin, and they get to where the cabin is in the mountains, and they go to check in, and Titus, being the man, is trying to check in, and the guy says, and what's your name? And he thinks for a second, and he says, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Well, the guy's like, yeah, right, or whatever, but they kind of get a giggle out of it because they used the name Mr. and Mrs. Smith that was on her list. So this area in the mountains is kind of like a college town. They hang out for a little bit, and then they finally go back to the cabin. When they get back to the cabin, Violet tells Titus that she wants to experience things with him. She wants to experience everything with him. And she starts coming on to Titus. She starts kissing him and rubbing his leg and everything, and he's still a little standoffish, but he's trying to kiss her back. You could tell that it's just not going well, and she decides she's going to try a little bit harder, and she talks a little dirty to him and everything, and he just pretty much brushes her off. He's just not into it. And she's like, "What's wrong? What's going on? And I want to experience this with you. I've never done this before, and I want to do it before I die." And he's like, I can't do it. And he says probably the most gross thing you can imagine in a situation like this. He says, "I feel like I'm being rubbed up by a zombie," referencing her about to be dead. And they have a big argument. They argue back and forth, and she talks about how she had these things that she's wanted to do with him ever since they met each other, and she's got very little time left, and she wants to do these things. And he says, "Hey, I'm sorry, but it's over between us, and I'm just not interested anymore. I feel like you're trying to push your dreams onto me." And they argue for a little bit, and finally they decide, "Hey, let's go back home." So they turn around, they get back in the up car, and it's quiet all the way back to her house. So he drops Violet off at her house, and he turns around and he goes back home. And a few months go by. She's trying to chat him every once in a while, but he's just really non-responsive, not having anything to do with her. And he's just being, again, a jerk. Well, one evening, Titus is sitting around with his family, talking to his dad, the dad telling a story to the family about this business trip that he went on whaling. He went hunting for whales. Titus gets this message that says, "She wanted me to tell you when everything stopped." Well, he thought it was part of the story at first, and he's still listening to the dad tell the story, and all of a sudden it comes through again. "She wanted me to tell you when everything stopped." Then he realizes that it was coming from Violet's dad. Well, he gets a little bothered, and he decides, "Hey, I'm going to go see Violet." So he leaves, and he drives to go see Violet. He gets to the house, he goes to her bedroom, she's out of it. She's not responsive to anything. Her health is down to 4.6, so she doesn't have long to go. She doesn't talk, she can't move, and he doesn't really know what to say to her. He's just standing there for a little bit, trying to figure out what to do, and there's really nothing he can do. So he goes back out to where the dad is, and they talk for a little bit, and all of a sudden the dad gets upset and starts blaming Titus for the condition. And Titus is like, "It's not my fault." And the dad says, "Yes, it is. It's your fault. If you hadn't taken her to that bar, she would have never been hacked, and this would have never happened to her." Well, they kind of argue a little bit, and Titus ends up leaving. Well, a couple of days later, Titus goes back, and he goes back in there to see her, and the dad just kind of steps out of the way and lets him go into the bedroom to see Violet. So he stands around, he starts talking to Violet for a little bit, and you can tell he's feeling bad, and he knows that he's really been a shitty person. And he starts talking to Violet, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to remember you. I'm going to remember the good times that we had. I'm going to remember when we kissed. I'm going to remember all the things that we done together, all the fun that we had at parties. You will always be remembered." And that's almost it, y'all. And the book ends by the feed noticing that he's down on his luck or down on himself, kind of feeling blue. And it says, "It seems that you're feeling blue. Might I recommend a blue jean sale for you? They're flying out the shelf. Get them before they're gone. Everything must go. Everything must go. Everything must go." And that was it, y'all. That's the way the book ended. I really enjoyed it. It was a good read. It was an easy read. Again, I would tell you, check it out. I gave it a 3.5 stars. It really should have been a 4-star, but that's my personal preference to the half point that I took off for it. But yeah, check it out. I really enjoyed it. I hope you will enjoy it as well. And I'd like to leave this by saying, hey, if you watch this all the way through, if you haven't liked the video, please reach down there and like it. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. And if you are on X, y'all, you can actually follow me on X. Go find Coffee with Steven. It's Coffee with me, COFFEEWIFME. But if you search for Coffee with Steven, it comes up as well. So yeah, check me out on X. Follow me. I'll give you a follow back. And that's a good place for us to conversate. Until the next video, y'all, the next book review, y'all have a great one. I really appreciate you being here. Bye.